I think foreign countries could.
The trust vote in the Karnataka Assembly on Thursday is set to become an exciting numbers game after the Supreme Court's interim order today on the political crisis in the state. The apex court ruled on two matters. One, that the Speaker can decide the fate of rebel MLAs in such a time as he sees fit. And second, that the rebel MLAs cannot be forced to attend an assembly sitting, including tomorrow's trust vote. So where does that leave the JDS Congress government? And what does it mean for the BJP's chances to regain power in the state? To discuss that, I'm joined by political analyst and former editor-in-chief of Outlook, Krishna Prasad, and Narendra Pani, professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. Krishna Prasad, let me start with you. Is it fair to say that as the numbers stand right now, the Kumaraswamy government is likely to fall tomorrow?
Well, there are lots of ifs here. I don't think we can surely say that things will go this way or that way for sure on almost anything just now. To start with, we do not know for sure as we speak at this moment whether the trust vote will take place tomorrow. One. Two, we are also not very sure as to how the Supreme Court order today will be viewed and implemented by the Speaker. Will he see this as an attempt to tie down the powers of the Speaker and the legislature, or will he act on his own, etc. Thirdly, as we speak just now, there are lots of confabulations happening in Bangalore where the Congress and JDS are essentially trying to do two things. They're trying to, one, explore the possibility of delaying this trust vote, one. And secondly, the JDS on its own has produced a number of pieces of evidence to suggest that what the Supreme Court said was in ideal circumstances. And unfortunately, what's happening in Karnataka is not quite the ideal circumstances. So the JDS is making a very clear pitch to suggest to the Speaker that these MLAs who have gone missing, who are all actually holed out in Bombay, they have done so at the behest of the BJP. They have used BJP aircraft. They have been seen with the BJP's man from the BJP. They have been carried by an aircraft belonging to a member of the BJP, etc., etc. So a number of pieces of evidence seem to have been adduced before the Speaker. And what we are getting to hear essentially is that the Congress JDS surely is on the brink, no question about that. Whether the MLAs resign or whether they are disqualified, the government is on the brink. But what the Congress JDS are trying to do is trying to put a spoke in the wheel of the BJP's plan. So they are putting up a number of obstacles in the path. They're trying to explore if it can be delayed, the trust vote. They're trying to show that the BJP MLAs have been holed out, at the behest of the BJP. And I think many things are in the air. And so we can't say for sure that things will go this way or that way, but for sure the BJP JDS Congress government is on its last legs. It's surely in a minority looking at the numbers, but we do not know how things will play out between now and tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon.
Fair enough. Let me just break that down of the 3 points combined in the first and the third point that you made. On what grounds can the Speaker rule that this trust vote will not be held tomorrow, and therefore on what grounds does the JDS get to say these are not usual circumstances?
Well, the Speaker, has been, as you can see from the Supreme Court order today, it's a kind of a curate's egg, the Supreme Court order. Both parties can claim on the either side that, they have been done, some justice. But the truth is that the Supreme Court order today does not specify that the resignations have to be accepted by tomorrow morning or this evening. It does not specify that. It gives the Speaker the time to decide. So I think that is one of the ways in which the Speaker will explore, and perhaps the other two parties will also try to explore some via media in this process. So I think that is one part of this whole process. Secondly, also a very important thing here, which is that although the Supreme Court says that the MLAs who are now camping in Bombay cannot be compelled, quote unquote, compelled to take part in the proceedings tomorrow or whenever it happens, the truth is that these MLAs have not sought the permission of the Speaker to go away from the House and to absent themselves from the proceedings tomorrow or whenever these proceedings take place. I think that is a very strong ground on which the Speaker can act, because for example, you have to take the permission of the House before you leave the House, and I think these MLAs have just tendered the resignation. That does not mean they have taken the permission of the House. So that is one ground on which I think the Speaker on one side and these two parties on the other will also try to kind of convey this impression. I think the threat of disqualification hangs very heavily on the heads of these MLAs. The disqualification may have been perhaps set aside partially by the Supreme Court, which said maintain the status quo, but I think there are very many other grounds on which these MLAs can eventually get disqualified. One, for absenting themselves from the House without letting the House know. Two, for example, if any others, minor bill is passed and a whip is issued for that bill and these MLAs are not present to vote in favor of that bill, again, those things can be used. I think we're getting too technical here, but I think a strong, simple point being made is that this absentation has taken place without the permission of the House, and the threat of disqualification is something both parties are trying to use to lure some of these MLAs back.
Krishna Prasad, I'm glad we got technical, because you sort of preempted my next question to Narendra Pani. Provided that the trust vote happens tomorrow, and provided that these rebel MLAs are either not in the House or don't vote along with the government, would that mean, Narendra Pani, that there is an automatic disqualification because of not following the party's whip, that the JDS whip and the Congress whip as directed? Would that mean an automatic disqualification?
I don't think there's anything automatic here, because there is this whole question of what comes first, the resignation or the disqualification. Can I get around the disqualification by resigning and therefore not taking the punishment that goes with the disqualification? Or on the other hand, can I use the disqualification as a weapon against any member who wants to resign? I think that is the critical issue, and whichever way the Speaker rules, I think it'll go back to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will decide that. And I think that's an important point, not just as far as Karnataka and the survival of this government goes, but as far as as what we do with defections. Because it also brings into play the question of what exactly is the point where you sort of get you have to be prepared for disqualification. Do you come after the Bombay judgment to try and there's a belief that it has to be on the floor of the House, but that has led now to a large number of anti-party activities going on, just as long as it's not on the floor of the House. So it's a question of whether the Supreme Court would want to further clarify on that. So whichever way Mr. Ramesh Kumar as the Speaker rules tomorrow, though there is a political aspect to this also, which I think is quite important. If we look at possibilities, there is the possibility of the government falling tomorrow, but the others getting, if not disqualified, if there are other resignations being accepted. For instance, a case can be made out that just two of these were clearly the disqualification processes against them had started well before the resignations came in, and those two would be disqualified. The others, the resignations might be accepted. In which case, you'll have more tricky possibilities, including the odd possibility of the next BJP government consisting of half of members who are not with the BJP. What that will do to other BJP aspirants is an issue. There's also the question of if they don't get what they want from the BJP and they are waiting for re-election, some of them I wouldn't rule out going back to the Congress. So it is really a wide open scenario with a great deal of instability built into it, even if the BJP wins tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched upon that, because I had a question in mind too, which I'll come to in just a bit, in the fact that the next government may not enjoy the majority either in some of the circumstances that you laid out. Before that, Narendra Pani, will the other side argue that special circumstances or not, the House will convene tomorrow with a number that is greater than the quorum required to convene, and the government needs to enjoy the majority of one more than the half of those present and voting, and that has been met, so let it go ahead?
Yes, there's also the other factor of the sort of the nature of the current Speaker. He has been someone who has spoken his mind before. He likes to believe he has a mind of his own. And just because the Congress and the JDS are putting up a case and he happens to belong to the Congress, I don't see any guarantee that he will quite simply fall in line. He has been a rather independent-minded person through a career, and this is his sixth term. One shouldn't speak too soon. One doesn't know what he'll do tomorrow. But I think it's not. It may not be entirely appropriate to expect him to quite simply fall in line with what the two parties want.
Krishna Prasad, a couple of riders to the next question. Does it mean that a prospective Yediyurappa government would enjoy a strength of around 107? The 105 MLAs, that 105 that they have, and the one independent and the one single member party MLA who switched over sides, who resigned as a minister. In one event, does the mark go down to 105 if a disqualification happens and if those resignations are accepted? If that is so, then in that event, does the BJP enjoy a number that is stronger than what the situation was last year when Mr. Yediyurappa had to resign in 3 days?
They say history repeats itself first as a comedy, then as a farce, or first as a tragedy, then as a farce. I think in Karnataka, there's a third phase. It repeats itself as a disgrace, simply because what we are seeing is just a replay of what has been, very grandly called Operation Kamla, but is actually a very devious way of wrecking Indian democracy from inside. I mean, so many tactics have been made, too many tactics have been used so far to dislodge this government. This is the sixth attempt of the BJP to dislodge the Congress-JDS government. So you have seen this so often and so many times and in so many different ways. I wouldn't venture to suggest what will happen tomorrow. But for sure, on paper, as we speak, there is clearly a numerical advantage that the BJP enjoys. It's a numerical advantage it enjoys only because it's engineered an absolute subversion of democracy by whipping away these MLAs to Bombay in their own aircraft, in a hotel owned by one of their people, with BJP members in Maharashtra chaperoning all these people, and so on and so forth. So I think the picture is so sad, so tragic, and so farcical that there is nothing you can venture to say. I mean, if the BJP really wants to form a government like this, we in the media and elsewhere should really be questioning what is left of political morality in this country, because you can see, as Professor Pani said, if half the next cabinet is going to be formed with people who have now fled and gone to Bombay. I mean, what is to be said about the other BJP members who have toiled for so long? So it seems to me that there's just nearly no political morality left in the BJP. And what we are seeing is quite a pathetic game. For example, just now as we speak, currently, one of the three people who has gone and met this speaker today is the former speaker who also belonged to the BJP, who had summarily disqualified MLAs some 10 years ago, and then was, of course, pulled back by the Supreme Court. But this is the farce that we are looking at. The very people who have destroyed Indian democracy are now trying to tell us that Indian democracy will be much better tomorrow onwards once this coalition government falls. This government surely does not deserve to stay one extra hour tomorrow. But that said, it does not automatically make the ground very clear for the BJP, because what they have indulged in is a shocking, absolute abdication of their responsibilities as a national political party. This is naked lust for power. The BJP is playing with fire, and once it forms the government, if it forms the government tomorrow or whenever it happens, I think it will still be riding a tiger. There is no guarantee that government will fall. And let's never forget that when the BJP last formed the government in Karnataka, it had 3 chief ministers, and one of those chief ministers went to jail. So I think this whole thing is so devoid of political morality. It seems almost as if we have accepted the fact that this is the way Karnataka politics should be conducted. And I think, speaking as a Kannadiga, it's a shame what's happening. And I hold all 3 responsible parties responsible for this absolutely ridiculous situation.
I do have more questions on this point that you raised about the trend line over the last 15 years that Karnataka politics has followed. Before that, I have one more technical question to Narendra Pani. If the resignations, as Krishna Prasad mentioned, if the resignations don't come through, say, by tomorrow, is there any tactical advantage for the current ruling camp to not take any action against these MLAs, keep that halfway mark at 112, so that the BJP too falls short of that mark because it's currently at 107? Or is there the risk that if you do that, they will merely cross over and vote for the BJP?
No, anytime they vote for the BJP on the floor of the House, they will get disqualified.
Okay.
And then that if they stay on in the House without pushing for the current resignation, then the idea that they've resigned first, that argument falls flat. So that would be a risk. But the possibility that that they will not be removed from the Congress, I think, is very much there. The MLAs, whenever they have spoken, have claimed that they remain in the Congress, that they have just resigned from this assembly. I mean, several of them have said that. So there is that possibility. So you don't know what will happen, particularly if the BJP doesn't sweep the elections that were the by-elections that are to occur after these MLAs' resignations are accepted.
All right, I wanted to take the point that Krishna Prasad made. What does it say of Karnataka politics, Narendra Pani, for the last 15 years that you've seen from that 2008 incident, the way Kumaraswamy hopped over sides from the Congress to the BJP for 1 week, then that early election, the way the numbers were assembled in 2008 for Yediyurappa the first time, the fact that Siddaramaya's leadership of the Congress was something that didn't go down well with the Congress party in the state because they saw him as an outsider, to the events of the last year. Where did one of India's most well-run states for a long period of time go so wrong?
See, I have a slightly more optimistic view of what has happened. I think basically you have had a massive decentralization of power right down to the level of the constituencies. So the MLAs today are more powerful than they have been in the past. Now there is no sort of established mechanism through which these fairly powerful local individuals who emerge in each constituency can be absorbed into these national parties. So they use that power to sort of bargain between the national parties. This happens even before the elections as they switch over to the parties that are most willing to have them or who they think will best sort of strengthen their chances of winning. So really what you're seeing is a completely dispersed power center, and it's a direct consequence, I would think, of the effectiveness of decentralization starting a little more than 15-20 years ago, before the national 93rd Amendment, going back, I think, at least till the time 87 and the decentralization of Krishna Hegde. But the point really is that we don't have a mechanism to get them to fall in line with commitments to a larger state cause. The politics has become almost entirely about constituencies, right down to what you can give my constituency. Many of the MLAs who have now rebelled, their main complaint is just that they have not been given the funds for their constituencies. So you're really reducing entire politics to a constituency level, you could claim, and it is in some sense democratic, but it is also not good for the state at all. It doesn't allow for larger ideologies, it doesn't allow for a larger vision for the state, and that becomes extremely destructive. So unless you can have some kind of a leadership that would emerge, that would recognize the role of these constituencies, recognize the role of constituency level leaders, and get them in a way within larger parties in a way that they are respected and yet build sort of contribute to a longer term vision, we are going to continue to see this trend in Karnataka.
Krishna Prasad, how much of what has happened and what the BJP has chosen to do in the last year would you put down to Mr. Yediyurappa's ambition to be Chief Minister again? Because I go back to the fact that, the 3 days after the election last year, it was one of those rare instances where you saw the Congress being more nimble and stitch up that alliance, almost as if perhaps Amit Shah wasn't as keen to do that, whereas he has previously in the past in Karnataka as he did last year. And even right now, the BJP hasn't similarly exploited a wafer-thin margin in a state like Madhya Pradesh. This seems to be one state where this is happening. So is this something that's driven from the top to at the center, or how much of this is Mr. Yediyurappa wanting to be Chief Minister desperately again?
Well, there are very many ways of looking at this. I think from the moment the BJP was denied the chance to form a government last year, it has nursed this grouse that it was denied a legitimate chance of forming the government in spite of being the single largest party. So from then on, it has consistently chipped away at the credibility of this government by consistently calling it an unholy alliance. So I think it's never forgotten the fact that the rug was pulled from under its feet by the Congress, so dramatically last year. So I think this thing has always been there. But there's also no question that Mr. Yediyurappa's he's reading the writing on the wall very well. He knows very well that if he doesn't grab this one chance of becoming chief minister, I think it will really be, end game for him. He's now over 75 years of age. I think there are very many forces within the BJP which want to see him out. In fact, there is no guarantee actually that even if he forms the government tomorrow, that he will last the next 4 years. There are lots of suspicion and rumors here. But I think the BJP has been driven essentially by this complete lack of political morality. It's displayed in Uttarakhand, Goa, Manipur, so many other states where it is just decided that it will come to power come what may. And I think what you're seeing in Karnataka is just a very good reflection of that. We should never forget that Karnataka is the pole position when it comes to Indian democracy. It was here in Karnataka 138 years ago that the first elective, representative assembly was formed. We should not forget that this was the state where social reforms of the highest order were introduced more than a century ago. We should not forget that women got quotas in this country, in this state, a long time back. So therefore, this state has pioneered Panchayat Raj reforms. So I think I doff my hat to the people who have done these things. But what you're seeing is a subversion, internal subversion of all of that at the doorstep of money. This has got no great values. It's got no great aims. It's just to come to power. The kind of monies being mentioned are shocking. Individual MLAs being offered 30 to 60 crore rupees. One television channel actually put up a full figure of 1,000 crore rupees that the BJP is playing with in Karnataka at this point of time. So what you are seeing is a subversion of a very high order, and whether Mr. Yediyurappa is doing it or other people around him are doing it or it's being driven down from Delhi, we know what it is. Mr. Yediyurappa will only just be lucky when he forms the government tomorrow or next week, because I think what we are seeing is a complete subversion of electoral law, a complete subversion of people's mandate, a complete subversion of almost anything you can think of, because these are MLAs who are just driven by nothing more than the naked lust for power, and ministerial office. These are, some of these MLAs are, it's a joke if you talk of what their demands are. Somebody who was made a minister 6 weeks ago is now gone and holed out in Bombay. Somebody who has 1,000 crore, declaration of assets and liabilities is sitting in Bombay. So I think what you're seeing is nothing to do with anything called politics, anything called, democracy, nothing called, values. It's just plain, straightforward, destruction of democracy from within.
On the flip side, what does it say about the state of the Congress right now, Krishna Prasad, that you have almost D.K. Shivakumar coming across as a Lone Ranger warrior, with everybody else far less aggressive than him, in trying to keep the flock together, may fail by tomorrow, but at least make an attempt to. There were newspaper reports a few days ago of a supposed car chase to the airport at a time when that party's central leadership is also in turmoil. There aren't state leaders as well in a state like this that feel the energy right now in the Congress to try and keep something intact?
That's a very good question. And I think that, although we may also, people like me blame the BJP entirely for what's happening, I think there are forces within the Congress which also want this to happen. I think within the Congress, especially after the loss in the general election, I think the feeling has gained ground that this coalition with the JDS is going to cost the Congress very heavily. So I think there are forces within the Congress which will benefit from some of what's happening. At least half a dozen of these people who are staying in Bombay owe their allegiance to Siddaramaiah. So I think there are forces within the Congress which want this coalition to end, which want all this to end. But for sure, as you rightly said, all this is benefiting from the fact that the Congress is virtually imploded in Delhi, and it really does not have a strong leadership in Delhi or have a strong leadership in Karnataka. In fact, the Karnataka Congress leadership is now almost entirely Mr. Siddharamaya's, and Shiv Kumar, in a sense, forms the fringe of it and is perhaps an independent lone ranger. But I think there are forces within the Congress which would like this to happen. They feel the JDS alliance was a mistake, that they paid heavily for this in the general election, and I think so many other people many within the Congress are trying to exploit the situation also to their benefit.
Narendra, Pani, my final question to you, and some of the points that Krishna Prasad raised as well. These are numbers that promise in any formation a stable government for the next 3.5-4 years. In the event of an early election amongst these three parties, what do each of them say to go back to the people saying, vote for us?
Well, I think all three will deny that they had anything to do with the end of the assembly as and when it happens. They will try to make their case on a basis of being absolutely fresh. Any sort of platform that they may choose at that point. But I think they will definitely go into denial as far as having any responsibility for what is happening here. That would be their official position. They might work out strategies, they would have to, and they will come up with those strategies as needed. But they will have to work out some kind of a platform on which they seek votes again. The BJP, what I find very interesting is the BJP does not believe that the kind of huge sweep it had in the parliamentary election will be translated into assembly elections. Otherwise, it would have called for fresh elections. But that is willing to go in for these kind of methods, which damage its credibility, damage its image at a national level, indicates that it sees the parliamentary election as a unique event and not necessarily one that can be repeated.
All right. It promises to be an exciting 24 hours, whichever way this goes, and the number of possibilities that Krishna Prasad and Narendra Pani have laid out. Thank you for making time for this conversation, and if you have been, thank you for watching.